Hey, welcome back everybody. So today I'm going to be tearing down this carburetor. It's off of a 2009 Kawasaki KZ250. The customer's chief complaint was that it was kind of bogging down above half throttle all the way to wide open throttle. So probably what that is a clogged up main jet. He's been running half 110, half regular fuel in this. So it shouldn't have too much of a problem with having too much ethanol in here, but his bike does sit quite a bit between races, so it may have some deposits down here in the bowl that may have worked its way up into the jets. So we'll just do a tear down on it, clean the jets, take a look at everything, and see if we need to get any parts ordered. So one thing I like to do, because these screws on the bottom, especially if you've never had them off before, this one I've had off several times, but I torqued these back down with new screws when I put them back together. But these screws here, if you try and just get them out with a regular screwdriver, what's going to happen is you're going to strip them out because they're extremely tight. From the factory and even from a shop, they're typically put back in with an impact driver. So they're torqued down very tight, and if you try and get just a regular screwdriver in there, a lot of times you'll round it off and strip it out, and then you have to drill it out, and it's a big headache. So what I like to do is to put it in my vise with a cloth over the jaw so you don't scratch anything up, and then use an impact hammer to get these screws out. And I'll show you how to do that. Let me get the camera moved over. Zoomed out a little bit. So I take a heavy rag, I put it over the top of my vise, open my vise up, and then put it in there. And you don't want to tighten this down too tight. You just kind of want to snug it up to where it doesn't move, because when you go to use an impact hammer on these screws, it's going to want to drop down on you. So if you just put this in the vise without any type of padding, it's more than likely going to break and chip the mounting surface for the inlet and outlet. So we'll get our impact hammer with a number 2 bit. And we're just going to put it on the screw and give it a whack. Now you don't want to beat the crap out of this thing. You want to give it just one good solid hit and then rotate it by hand to make sure it's loosened up. Let me zoom out just a little bit more. So go on to the next one, put it in there, one solid whack, give it a turn, and it loosens up. Take the bowl off, set it aside. We'll clean the bowl. I kind of just want to get down in here, take a look at the jets, and see what might be going on. So the first indication that something ain't right you can see the green deposits on this brass jet. So that's corrosion and oxidation. So that's typically the first indication that the thing has sat a while. And this brass has started to corrode, and that corrosion's kind of worked its way up into the jet. So that probably explains what's going on with it. So let me get you moved over and zoomed in. Now, when you're taking jets out, one thing that I've seen a ton of people do that I can't stand, and I've had to fix a lot of carburetors that somebody's cleaned previously or attempted to clean or rebuild, and either damaged everything or stripped everything out. So you want to use a small crescent wrench on the main jet, just tighten it up, give it a quick turn. Make sure you don't use any type of pliers, channel locks, anything like that. Anything besides either the correct size wrench or a crescent wrench will either round off, chip, or break this jet because they're very brittle, so they break quite easily. So we'll pull our main jet out, set it aside, pull that out. Let me go grab a flathead screwdriver. So once you get the main jet out, you can see the other two jets. There's one here and one here. Sometimes you have to use an impact hammer if this thing is sat for a really long time. You'll have to use an impact hammer to get those out. But if you keep your bike serviced, these should come out with minimal force, because when you put them back in, you don't crank them down. You just kind of snug them up a little bit. So there's one jet. There's our other jet. So every carburetor is a little bit different. On this carburetor, it just has a pin that holds the float in and the float valve in. Sometimes there's a screw here, just a little compression screw that's holding down a rod. For these type here, you just take a pick, push the pin out to one side and pull it out. We pull our float out. And we pull our float jet out, our metering jet. So this here, when you're inspecting it to see if it needs to be replaced, you check this rubber tip. These things here are dirt cheap, and I recommend anytime you have it apart to go ahead and order a new one of these and get it replaced. But that little rubber tip on the end, what happens is that dries out and cracks, and that will allow fuel to get around this float valve, and then you'll be overrunning the carburetor. You typically flood the engine, and you'll have all kinds of runnability issues. These are a couple bucks a piece. If you do your own carburetors, it's a good idea to order a bunch of these, and anytime you take the carburetor apart, go ahead and replace it. With this, I don't know what's going on with this machine yet, so I haven't ordered any parts. But this one appears to be in good shape, and I just serviced this carburetor about 6 months ago, but I think it's sat for a while. So I'll probably keep the float valve. I'll probably keep it because it's in good condition. That rubber tip is nice and soft. We'll continue with the tear down. So there's not very much residue. Typically when you get a carburetor that's sat for a while, you'll have kind of a yellowish varnish looking stuff in the bottom, either up here or in the bowl. And yeah, you can see that kind of yellow tinted stuff. That's what happens when the new type of gas with so much ethanol in it picks up moisture, and then the gas evaporates and it leaves a deposit. So that's why it's always a good idea to keep your carburetor full. That old adage of, turn your fuel off and run the carburetor until the motor dies to get all the gas out of the carburetor. That's one of the worst things you can do, because then there's still a little bit of fuel in here. You won't take all the fuel out by running it. You have to manually drain the carburetor. So what happens is you leave a very small level of fuel in the bowl in the very bottom of it, and that leaves a lot of air in the carburetor for the gasoline to evaporate. Once it evaporates, it leaves behind deposits, and then you pick up trash in your bowl. When you go to turn the gas back on and you start running it, it's going to pick up some of that debris and push it into your jet, so then your jets get clogged up and you get runnability issues. So that's why it's always a good idea to keep stabilizer in your fuel, especially with this new type of fuel, and also keep your carburetor full. Don't turn your gas off and then run the engine till it dies. Just turn your gas off so that if something happens, it doesn't leak gas all over the place. But you want to make sure at least the bowl is full as possible without overrunning, so that you avoid or kind of minimize the amount of deposits that are in your carburetor. So we'll flip it over. It's got 2 Allen screws on top. You don't need to pull the top half off and the slide out. I like to just kind of wipe everything down, take a look at everything, look and see if there's any kind of wear marks, and also take a look at, on top of the top cap, this rubber seal that goes around. Take a look at that, make sure it's not cracked or dry rotted, and then when you put it back together, put a light coating of oil on it. That makes sure that you got a nice airtight seal at the top of the carburetor. So actuate the slide. The actuation feels good. It doesn't have any binding or anything in it, but I'm still going to go ahead and pull it out. So it's got this one screw right here on the shaft we're going to take out, Phillips number 2. We rotate that around and then pull our slide out. So overall, the slide looks pretty good. The rollers look good. There's no wear on them. There is a little bit of wear on the slide. You can see right there where the paint's missing, but that could have just been breaking. I mean, that's minuscule because it just took the coating of protective coating off. It didn't actually start digging into the material, so that may have just been on break-in, just kind of fine-tuning the clearances inside the slide. Then you pop 3 of these wheels will have bearings in them. One of them just has a guide on it. And you'll want to spin these bearings. Now, to see if a bearing is good, you have to put some type of axial load on it. So you really can't tell by just spinning it, but you can put a good amount of down pressure on it and roll it slowly, and you'll be able to feel the ball bearings engage. If there's any kind of debris in the bearing, you'll feel it kind of cog over. It won't be smooth. Now this isn't, 100% accurate way to check bearings, but for this application, it's just going up and down a small amount, and there's no axial load on it. There's no load pushing on it in any one direction except down, which doesn't push on the bearings. The bearings just guide the rollers and make sure that it's got a smooth actuation up and down the bore. So everything looks good with it. The body itself is nice and clean. I'm still going to spray these out with some carburetor cleaner, but overall the body looks good. We'll take a look at our main jets, and you can look on the main jet. It's got a big enough hole that you can see down in there. See if I can get it to focus. So you can see a little bit of light through there. It is restricted a little bit. I can see some debris down in there. So we're going to run, I'll see if I can't find my tip cleaners. I use welding tip cleaners that you can pick up on eBay or Amazon, Harbor Freight, any of your tool suppliers. And they're for cleaning the tip of a MIG gun, cleaning the trash out of it. They work really good for cleaning carburetors because they go down to a very, very small size. So let me go round up some tools and I'll be right back. Okay, I got me a container. Usually I spray everything off outside, and I'm going to spray off the carburetor body outside. The stuff I like to use is made by Gunk. It's one of the few chlorinated products that you can still get. A lot of stuff nowadays are going green, so they've done away with the chlorinated formulas and went to a more eco-friendly formula. The chlorinated stuff, whether it's carburetor cleaner or brake part cleaner, there is a difference between chlorinated and non-chlorinated. The chlorinated stuff works really well. Non-chlorinated, you have to use a lot more of it, as in addition to rags and wire brushes and stuff to get the same result. So I really like chlorinated as long as you can still get it in your area. One thing to be careful of, this stuff, the chlorinated stuff will eat rubber, plastic, even nitrile and latex. So I wear gloves because this stuff is pretty caustic, but if you get it on your gloves, it's going to eat through the gloves, so the gloves are one-time use. But generally I only wear it when I'm spraying stuff down. So we're going to take our main jet. Fortunately on these bigger bikes, the spray tube on the can typically can be fit into the entry or the exit of the nozzle or the jet that you're spraying. And I'd get a plastic container and then fill it up with a little bit of water. That helps dilute the chlorinated cleaner, and keeps it from eating the plastic and getting in the air, so you don't breathe that stuff in. It kind of helps trap some of those particles. So I usually fit it into the jet as best I can and then wrap my fingers around it to kind of keep, if anything sprays back, it won't spray back in my face. My fingers will catch it and it'll kind of diffuse it. So give it a couple good pulses of cleaner. And clean off the outside a little bit. Take a rag. Wipe it down real good, and then take a look inside of there and see if that orifice looks any cleaner. It's already got a bigger opening in it from what I can see. Let me see if I can get it to focus. So once you got it cleaned out as best you can, I can't find my tip cleaners at the moment, but these I don't think will need it. You spray them out with brake part cleaner, and then you take them over to your air compressor and blow compressed air through them. And sometimes you have to do that 3 or 4 times to get all that crap out of the jet. So we'll go on to our next jet, and then I'll head over to the compressor. So same type deal, just fit the jet on the tube as best you can, wrap your fingers around it, and then spray your cleaner until you see a nice solid jet. If the jet's really clogged up, you'll see it kind of trickle out for a couple seconds, and then the stream will pick up a little more, and then it'll be a nice solid stream of cleaner coming out of the exit side of the jet. So that's what you want to see. So then we got our next jet, same type deal. So on these jets, you have an orifice that's drilled all the way through it, and then you have tiny orifices right there. So the way I clean those, I take the straw of my carburetor cleaner, I put it on the entrance side of the jet, and I put my finger over the exit side, which when you spray will force all the cleaner out of those tiny little orifices on both sides. And we got a nice stream there. So, and this is what it does to nitrile gloves, and this is why we wear gloves, because this stuff is highly caustic, and it's probably no good for you. I'm sure it seeps into your skin pretty quickly, and can cause some undesirable side effects over the long term. But you can see it just eats nitrile. These are 5 mil nitrile gloves, and it's eating them up pretty good. So I'm gonna go get a new pair of gloves on. I'm gonna take the carburetor body outside, spray it off, and I'll be right back. Okay, got everything sprayed down and cleaned up, at least internally. Typically, or what I like to do is to dismantle everything, pull all the sensors and jets and seals out, and soak all the parts in my ultrasonic cleaner for usually about 15 to 20 minutes in some mild detergent like soap and water. And that usually gets this thing sparkling clean inside and out. Unfortunately, my ultrasonic cleaner is broken. I have a can of, I forget the name of it, but it's a carburetor cleaner. Comes in a big 1 gallon can, paint can. I use that stuff for carburetors that are really bad before going into the ultrasonic cleaner, and then being manually cleaned with carburetor cleaner and a wire brush and stuff like that. So we got everything apart. One thing I like to do on these type of carburetors that have the removable slide in it is to put the slide in first. And the reason for that, the pin that's on the bottom of the slide will be poking through here. So if you try and put the main jet in first, which that pin goes in the center of the main jet, when that pin is through here, or the jet's through here, and you try and put the pin through, it's a real pain to get it lined up. If you put the slide in first and then put the jet in, you can maneuver the jet around that pin and to get it to go in a little easier. So reassemble our slide. And put our rollers back on. It may take a little bit of finagling to get that pin to drop into the opening. Come on, get in there. There we go. Then it drops down in there. Once it's all the way down, you'll be able to put your screw back into this pin. Then you'll want to actuate the butterfly from here to make sure that the slide goes up and down or opens and closes nice and smooth. You don't want any binding or catching, because if you get any kind of binding in here, when you hook up your throttle cables, you'll definitely get some binding. Then your throttle will stick partially open, not close all the way, or hang up. Causes all kinds of problems. So we want a nice smooth operation. This one's got a nice strong spring on it. So we are done for the top half. Put our cover back on. We'll flip it over and start putting our jets in. Now, you don't want to crank these things down, because if you turn too tight, you'll end up breaking the tabs off of the jet, and then you have a real hard time getting them out of there. Sometimes you have to drill them out. So you just want to run them down till they stop and give it just a little bit of oomph after that to get it to seat. But that's all you need. You don't need to crank these things down. And then here's what I was talking about with that pin that sticks out the bottom. You see that pin sticking up. If the jet's already in there, you have to try and get the pin lined up inside that small hole inside, in the jet. If you put your slide in first, you can take your jet, just kind of run it around it, and then thread it down. Oh, wait. Forgot the little guard that goes in there. Snug that up a little bit. Take our float and our float valve. Put our float valve on the float tang. And then we want to insert the float valve into the bushing. Take our pin. Line up the float, run our pin through. Now, if you haven't had any problems with your bike for a long time, if you're just doing routine maintenance and cleaning, you should never have to adjust the float level in your bowl, which is what that little tang on the float does, that little metal tab that the float valve hangs off of. You should never have to adjust that. If you adjust it one way or the other, you're now adjusting the level of fuel that's available in the bowl. Now, if you are having run abilities, like the bike stalls out going up a hill or something, but it runs fine the rest of the time, or you go up a real steep incline and it starts stalling, your float level may be too low, and so the carb starves for fuel when it gets at an angle, when the bike gets at a steep enough angle. So if that's the case, you'd want to adjust your tang a little bit to get you a higher level of fuel in the bowl. And likewise, conversely, if you're dumping fuel into your motor when it's not running, or you're dumping fuel on the ground, your fuel level is set way too high, and you got to adjust that tang the other direction to get the fuel level down to a manageable level. And that's what all these little tubes coming off of here do. These are all the overflows in case the bike tips over, or in case the fuel level's too high, it'll just start dumping fuel out the little drain tubes. We'll fit our bowl back on and set our throttle adjustment, or your idle adjustment, on the tab. So that's it. That's how I clean my carburetor. So like I said, usually I use an ultrasonic cleaner, but unfortunately mine is broken. But if you're doing just seasonal maintenance, or you're just starting to have a couple runnability problems with it, you know, it's cutting out, popping out of the exhaust system, cleaning is generally what's needed. You generally don't have to adjust the carburetor if it was running good previously. It's probably just dirty jets and it's being starved for fuel. And I can cover carb tuning in another video, but I think that's about it for this one because it's getting kind of long. So if you got any questions, post them below. If you want to see any other videos, also post that below, and I'll see what I can do about getting one of those videos made. If you like this video, please rate, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.